The clients I work with tend to have worked in blue-collar jobs: refineries, shipyards, foundries, factories. It seems like the dirtier the job, the more you were affected by asbestos. My grandfather was a mechanic, and a lot of the cars he worked on were chock full of asbestos. The brakes, the clutch, exhaust gaskets, even some of the wiring in older cars had asbestos. My dad was exposed to asbestos when he worked in a titanium foundry in the 1950s. My grandmother was exposed to asbestos insulation and protective gear while she was working on an assembly line at an electronics factory. She was also exposed to asbestos by laundering my grandfather's dirty work clothes. All of my family breathed in a lot of asbestos, and they all developed asbestos-related cancers. Back then, I didn't know much about asbestos at all, but in my first job as a lawyer, I was assigned 2 clients injured by asbestos exposure, and I started reading these documents that the asbestos companies had put out. I discovered that as early as the 1930s, the asbestos industry knew that if you breathed asbestos, it was dangerous to your health. But instead of putting a label on their product to warn people about the dangers of their products, they decided to hide the dangers of asbestos. It really wasn't until the 70s and 80s that they got caught. The reason they got away with it for so long is that asbestos has what's called a long latency period. That means that if you breathe asbestos, it can be years or decades before you see any harm to your health. Many of the clients that I've helped over the years were first exposed to asbestos when they started working in jobs in their 20s or 30s, but they were only diagnosed with asbestos-related illnesses in their 70s and their 80s, because that's how long it can take for symptoms to actually show up. And it wasn't just workers who would have been exposed to asbestos. Health studies have shown that people who live with someone that brought asbestos home on their work clothes are at a higher risk for developing asbestos-related illnesses, including mesothelioma and other cancers. Many of my clients are the spouses of people who worked at asbestos job sites. They themselves were never directly working with asbestos, but they were exposed to it by washing asbestos-tainted work clothes, like my grandmother did for my grandfather. We fortunately caught an asbestos-related cancer that was forming for one of our clients early enough for her to get treated, and she's still alive. The National Cancer Institute says that there's no clear safe level of asbestos exposure in terms of mesothelioma risk. So if you think you've been exposed to asbestos, or have any symptoms of an asbestos-related illness, be sure to see a healthcare professional and get tested, even if it's just for your peace of mind, because it can take a while for these symptoms to appear. What I do is help clients receive compensation that was set up by the justice system for people just like them. Courts ordered asbestos companies to place their insurance money in trusts to pay for people's illnesses and injuries related to asbestos exposure. Most of the time, we don't even have to file a lawsuit to collect these funds. But nearly half of the funds set aside have still gone unclaimed, mostly because people either don't know they were injured by asbestos, or they don't know that they're entitled to compensation. If you think you may have been exposed to asbestos, you can search our online database to see how. It's on our website, and our database contains detailed information about thousands of companies, work sites, and products that contain asbestos. If you are diagnosed with an asbestos-related illness, get in touch with me by phone, by text, or by email. I'll listen patiently to your story and explain your rights under the law with no charge and no obligation. We can speak by video conference or any way that works for you. Asbestos illness can come with a lot of ongoing costs. Doctor's bills and expensive medications, things add up. This compensation is meant to ease the financial burden of those harmed by asbestos and help them leave a legacy behind for their loved ones. Every case is different, but I've obtained large settlements for thousands of clients over the years who have been harmed by asbestos. I learned about the dangers of asbestos too late to help my father and grandparents, but maybe I can help you.